There are a lot fewer two-parent families.
What's worth more, a dollar today or a dollar tomorrow?
Almost nobody gets out of love alive.
Prisoners' rights is out of sight, out of mind.
Is your brain on God?
You ain't ready to
There
apply
are discussions
how
as
they thought
black families we have to have them.
What's worth more, a dollar today or a dollar tomorrow? What's worth more, a dollar
The other day at work, one of my coworkers was having a conversation about Tupe Fiasco and his comments about certain countries in Africa being shitholes, et cetera, et cetera. So this person is a black male from Africa. I forget which country, but I'm pretty sure he was born, raised there, and migrated here, either as an adult or a child. So he proceeds to say that Tupe Fiasco had a point. And at that point, I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, what do you mean he has a point? And so he starts getting into like the socio-economical like details, and like this person is being extremely logical. And I'm like, dude, I am disappointed in you. And he's like, excuse me? I'm like, as a black man from Africa that was born on the continent, you're actually like agreeing with what he said. And then he proceeds to tell me that I'm being emotional and I'm applying emotion to a logical statement. And so I said, well, if I'm being emotional, the Cheeto-elect started it. And I proceeded to then say, I'm not going to allow you to take emotion from me. And when I say that, I mean not just men, and maybe I should have clarified that in my post, but I was referring to an incident that happened to me. People in general tend to throw the word emotion out there as a gaslighting statement, whereas if I call you emotional, that's bad and that's shunned upon. And now I'm going to focus on the fact that you just called me emotional and illogical, and I'm not going to focus on the issue. So I didn't allow him to do that. And that's the problem that I had. And the fact that he was completely applying logic to an illogical statement. The Cheeto-elect is not a logical individual. So you're wasting your time applying logic to any of his statements. And so, yeah, that's the context behind that statement.
Okay, so let me ask, if I could ask, go a little deeper. So, well, what did he say though? Is in support. Like, what did he say specifically?
You know what? He said something to the effect of that the United States involvement in a lot of these African countries don't help or don't offer any real aid anyway. So he can understand Donald Trump's point. It was something to that effect. And even then, it still didn't make any sense. My issue was, dude, you're really going Donald. Oh God, I said his name. Knock on wood. The Cheeto-elect did not put that much thought into his statement. So I'm not going to put that much energy or thought into deciphering what he may have or may have meant. That's the point.
Gotcha.
I was making.
Gotcha.
And that's pretty much what I said, and I was called emotional.
Okay. All right. Why don't you explain a little more? Okay. So the reason why I initially wanted to talk about it was because I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of calling women emotional all the time, but the reasons behind it.
Of course, my own brother does it.
The reason for me specifically is because if I ask you to explain why you have an issue with what I may be saying, I don't get fact, the support. I don't get any supporting details. What I get is pure emotion, pure feeling.
But what does that mean? There are no, and just like I said in my post, there are no decisions that have ever been initially made or enacted without emotion. So what does that mean? That's the blanket term. Well, what does emotion mean? What are you really saying when you're calling a woman emotional? Because what I hear is you're calling me irrational, and I hear that you don't care about what I'm saying.
Not so much that I would love to care about what's being said. It just has to be about fact. It has to be about the issue, the issue at hand. Not okay. So if I take the situation with you and this African brother, so you heard him say something, right? You just heard him say something. Your initial reaction was what now?
My initial reaction when I heard him say it was, "What the fuck?"
Okay,
but
no, which is fine. If you leave it there, Tia, that's when I have the problem. If you leave it right at that, what the fuck, and then it's centered around, well, you don't know what you're talking about, and how could you say that? And it's nothing about, well, listen, let's talk about what Donald Trump actually said. He said shithole countries. As you can see, da 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 da. That's a different approach than just saying what the fuck, and it's centered around emotion, no details, no facts, and I run into that all the time, all the time.
My thing is that,
Go ahead, Dave.
I mean, I kind of see that in both. Like the thing about me, and is why I hashtag if we knew better, is because I see that in men too. I see that emotional side, especially with arguments in men as well.
Mm-hmm.
That when we throw it just on women, we kind of deflecting a little bit. You're not opening up the argument to actually have that rationality.
Mm-hmm.
You're not opening it up for us to actually have that conversation, and that depends on what you're actually talking about. But if you're talking about something specific like this, like even with the shithole country, I had two coworkers who pretty much had the same thing. It was a white guy kind of agreeing with Donald Trump, and the black guy.
They're called colonizers now. They're called colonizers.
Colonizers.
Yes.
Speaking about colonizers, the colonizer was agreeing with Donald, with Cheeto. Like I'm gonna go with that for now to honor Tia since she's our guest. And there was a black guy in there, and he started completely, going into the racist aspect of it. It wasn't any real going back and forth with any facts or logic. He got very emotional to the point where he walked out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that emotion run both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that's labeling just women as emotional, especially when it comes to arguments, when it's everybody, that's my thing. That's when I think, we gotta refocus on what that word actually means.
But
and you apply it too.
Mm-hmm.
You, the both of you actually made me realize what, aside from him calling me emotional, what really bothered me about it is that the whole what the fuck thing was up here. I didn't vocalize that.
Okay.
Number two is I responded with logic and I was still called emotional. So that's just telling me, one, you don't like what I said, and instead of coming with a counterpoint, you're just going to deflect and call me emotional. That's what really bothered me.
That's different.
And, as far as what you said about, you're guilty of calling women emotional because when you ask a woman in the middle of an argument or whatever, a disagreement, to explain why she's upset, learning to communicate what you're thinking and how you're feeling is a skill. Mm-hmm. And people laugh at me when I say that because it's true.
I agree.
When I was a teenager, like encountering microaggressions, like because I went to an all-white summer camp, I was constantly fucking upset and I didn't understand why. Mm-hmm. Now, as a 32-year-old woman, I'm able to communicate those feelings. So a lot of that has to do with how we were raised, specifically, like, man up. I was raised to be tough. You don't talk about, how you feel. So we all end up like having to recover from like the shit that we have been indoctrinated into as children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel that to build off of that a little bit, I do realize sometimes when people get emotional, because I know I've done it in the past, is that you kind of maybe feel what the other person's saying is wrong, but you don't know how to vocalize it. You might not have the information level, you might not, but you just know it's wrong, and you let that side come out more, but you don't have anything really to back it up. Mm-hmm. So you get a little bit more irrational and emotional with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I say, let me back up a bit. Understand it. I'm a male acting emotional. They get checked as well. I'll call them emotional as well. It's not just females. It's just that when we were having me looking at the post specifically, it was interaction between male and female. But I'll tell a male real quick if he's being emotional. And I'm trying my best not to ever because I don't want to come off like, I've always told you before about me coming off sounding sexist sometimes with some of the things that I may say. But you know, if I ask you, Tia, if I ask you, huh? I've gotten better, right? And again, like I'm glad you say that because again, sometimes I am so not aware of it. You know, I'm so not aware, and it's not intentional. It's not personal. If I ask this question to you, um, just naturally, are women more emotional than men? In
No,
your
I don't
opinion?
think so. No.
Okay, so that's the way that I was raised. That way, I was raised to kind of like believe that, and that's probably why.
Well, we all were raised that way. The difference between men and women is that men and women are equally as emotional as women.
Mhm.
Men were just told to hide it and taught to hide it better than women do. That's the
Interesting.
only difference.
Interesting. Okay. Well, again, so then I'll leave that part alone. You know, you definitely explain that part. And like I said, I just want you to know that even though I'm guilty of it, it's because I don't get the facts, the details. That's not the answers that I
But
get.
are you going to continue to do it? Because
Continue.
to me, it goes equal both ways. And like, as a kid, babysitting like my little boy cousins, like stop being emotional. You know, that's something that I've become cognizant of, and like I'm gonna attempt to not do it.
Mhm.
And what's wrong with being emotional? What's wrong with having feelings?
Now, it just has to be balanced, and especially if the conversation really can do better without it. Like if we're having a conversation, let's be honest here. Are there not some conversations? Are there not some? Are there not some conversations that will be better, better had without emotions in it? No, there's none. There's no conversations.
When you say without emotions, do you just mean having better control of your emotions? See, this is the problem with people as far as no, we don't naturally think about what we're saying.
Gotcha.
I feel like what you're really saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is
Gotcha.
it's not that certain conversations are better without emotion. Certain conversations are better when the individual has control of their emotions, because that's different.
Well, not even so much as the control of the emotions. It's because I'm not even talking about not being able to control yourself. I mean, where okay, let me take let's say parenting for instance. If I'm having a conversation with a woman about a style of parenting for let's say
All right, so you talking to the wrong person because I don't have kids, but I'm gonna let you.
Okay, but no, what I'm saying is okay. You don't necessarily have to have a kid to be able to have this conversation though, because I'm just talking about a parenting style, of males versus females, fathers versus mothers, right? Just the way that they parent a little different. If we're having a conversation, let's talk about two individuals who share a child, right? And they're having a conversation about, the upbringing, how they're going to raise them. A lot of times, well, I'll just use my personal, like with my wife, for instance, when it comes to having conversations about my oldest son who was 14. When I mean emotion, if the conversation is about getting him prepared for adulthood, right? There's specific things that we can do now to get him prepared for that. I'm talking about specific things we can put in place to get him prepared for adulthood. Emotion, in my opinion, has no place in that particular conversation. When you put the emotion in there, it just makes it difficult to get to what we're trying to accomplish.
But again, emotional is a blanket term. What emotions is she feeling? Is she feeling anxiety about the thought of her son leaving the nest home
That could be part of it.
one day?
That could be part of it.
My point is, if you clarified what you meant, just like you want women to clarify what they mean, a lot of this could be mitigated on the surface.
Okay. All right. So one of my biggest issues with the generation that my son falls into, 14 years old, is I just think that they feel entitled, and a lot of them are lazy, right? So if from me trying to prepare him for adulthood, there's certain, let's take chores for instance. Since you need, so I'm gonna give you real specifics. Let's take chores for instance. If I say, listen, every Monday the garbage man comes around and he picks up the garbage. So your responsibility is to take this garbage can to the curb every Monday before you go to school. Real simple, right? Now, if his mother comes into play, she may feel like, well, why is it that you want to have him take the garbage can out? Don't you think he's a little too young for that? Well, no, I mean, well, listen, we don't know if he's too young until we can see he's too young. So let's go ahead and try. Let him go ahead and try to take the garbage out one time and see what happens. yeah, but it's kind of early and stuff. And don't you think that we might have to worry about something being out there at night and coming and biting him and stuff? And I'm like, listen, man, all I want to do is get him to start having some responsibility. If you think taking the garbage is too big for him, then give him something that's a lot safer than him walking to the curb with the garbage can. So we come inside. How about washing the dishes after he eats breakfast? Um, yeah, but they gotta get up and go to school and stuff like this, man. They don't have any time. You see where I'm going with this, Tia?
I'm seeing where you're going.
The problem.
I think that's a different kind of argument because that seems like it's a more opinionated.
But it's filled with emotion. But it's emotion driven. If that's not emotion driven to you.
Emotion driven, but I think even if it wasn't, it would still be a matter of opinion. Like even if you take the emotion out, it's a matter of is he too young to do this or is he old enough or
Yeah,
give him
I agree. I agree with Dane. It sounds like to me just a difference of opinion and style of parenting.
So if
it sounds like you and your wife have different definitions for like responsibility because like I grew up washing dishes since I was like 8, so that's like light work.
My wife is I've said it before, but she's from Barbados. So with a West Indian background, what I've come to find out is that a lot of times.
No, my dad's Jamaican. Boys aren't supposed to wash dishes and do stuff like that.
All right. So now, all right. So now it's a culture thing, right? But we're not in Jamaica or we're not in Barbados. So whatever it is that and that's the issue. So now when we're talking about logic here, all I'm talking about is having a conversation with this woman about getting this kid prepared for adulthood.
Logic, but it's also internalized like this whole bullshit about gender roles. As far as like my dad is Jamaican, like boys, most of the boys in the West Indies know how to cook, but like outside of like washing dishes, like mopping the floor, like that's internalized gender roles. So you should have a conversation with her about that. That's what it sounds like to me because I don't understand why he can't wash the dishes. What time do kids have to be to school down south? Like the same times? 8?
Oh well, I'm
he's in New York.
Yeah, I will up here.
Okay. So they're at school at like what 7:55 in the morning.
I think he gets out of here about 7 o'clock. I think he gets out of here about 7.
Yeah. So like wake up 15 minutes early and wash the dishes. I'm on your side on this.
All you're doing is using logic, though. That's a logical way to have this conversation.
I don't have any emotional investment in this conversation. It's not my kid.
But does that even matter though? Because if it's now that's perfect.
Yeah,
that's a perfect.
Yeah,
okay.
It matters.
So because I have, what we can just think about. If I'm gonna jump off the topic a little bit. Just think about back to this Trump situation. Shithole countries. Were you emotionally invested in that conversation?
As a black person, yeah, and I felt like he should have been as well, but I never would have vocalized that to him.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, you just because you're emotionally invested doesn't mean that you can't apply the logic. You can't stick to facts, and is what I'm saying.
No. What I'm saying is that when a person is emotionally invested in a topic, whatever it is, they're more likely to care.
Gotcha.
We're just having a discussion. Like if I knew your son, like with my godson, for instance, I would have no problem telling my best friend, like, yo, you're bugging and you're spoiling him. That's completely different. With somebody that I don't know on the outside looking in, of course you're going to be logic and you're not going to apply emotion to the situation.
Well, Tia, what I mean is, this is the thing. I'm just talking about a way to approach issues or conversations, debate situations. Why can't we just leave the emotional part out of the path to get to the solution? Is what I'm saying. Whenever we're
not sociopaths. Like
okay. Excuse me.
I hear people say that, why can't we just leave emotion out of it? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm thinking about it too hard. All I hear is, why can't you think the way I think? Why can't you feel the way about it? I feel the way about it. That's all I hear.
No, not necessarily, because it's not about.
You didn't say no. You said no, not necessarily, meaning there's some truth to what I just said.
All right, so let me just say no. I won't say not necessarily, because what I mean is, I just want to be able to have the conversation. If someone is bringing a different view, right, to a conversation, that's fine. But as long as the view is based in logic, fact, and the details, you're supporting the things that you're saying. I'm
Okay,
comfortable
so
if you
what?
throw some emotion in there. If you throw an
So
F
that leads me to
bomb,
my next question.
yeah. If you had a couple F bombs in the middle of you explaining with fact and detail, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable. But if it's a F bomb, filled, just nonsensical, ramble, I tune out because of that, and that's what I'm referring to. I'm referring to that type of a conversation with a woman or male. I could care less. Could care less when especially when I'm talking about issues that relate to descendants of slaves. Whenever I'm having conversations about those types of issues, I don't want the emotion part. I want to I hope people could kind of suppress that stuff with those conversations, because I'm trying to get to a solution here. And every time I get into a conversation with someone, they bring the emotion. It makes it hard for us to continue to get to the solution. That's really what
Okay,
it's centered around.
that you sound like what a lot of these alt-right conservatives say about the Black Lives Matter movement. Make it more palatable. Stop bringing emotion into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I get what you're saying, and you have a valid point, but that's a dangerous slope because it's going to have to apply all across the board.
Um, and real quick, so what would be wrong with that if it was applied all across the board?
If it was applied all across the board, I
Mhm.
would send you to look somebody's mother in the face that just got their head blown off by a cop and say, "Don't bring emotion into this town hall."
Nah,
I wouldn't do that.
no, but see, I want to be clear that the emotion in and of itself is not the problem if you have the details and stuff to go with it. I don't have an issue.
And
A lot of
I
these
think at the
people.
end of the day, that's what it's down to. It's
Hmm.
not a matter of the emotion. It's a matter of having the details to
That's
back up your argument and
that's all it
everything
is.
else.
But a
Because
lot of
when,
these people and protesters have the details to back it up, but because
yeah,
they're
yeah.
labeled as emotional, people don't hear them.
That's what the problem is. The problem is you using that emotional uh, title or
Hmm.
label just to throw somebody else's argument off, just
Thank
because
you.
you might not have an argument. So that is what the overall problem is. The problem is not the emotion, because I realize, especially a lot when we have so many conversations, that there's somebody in that conversation that is emotional. And
Indeed.
there's nobody who I've seen, like, I've gotten emotional in the conversation, but if I could back it up and if I could suppress the emotion a little bit, if I suppress just flipping out and try to get to my point, then we're good. We can have a real conversation. I've
Hmm.
seen, Ray get emotional a couple of times. I've seen Cyrus get emotional. I've seen you get passionate about
Ooh,
things.
always.
It's part of, I think, any conversation. I think that's what makes the conversation good. But the fact is being able to back it up with the information. So
Right.
most of the time when people don't have the information, then they call the other party emotional
Got you.
because they don't have any kind of information to do it. So it's not the emotion,
Hmm.
it's the information and having to back it up.
I mean,
And
but
if you can see through all of that, you know that emotional labeling is bullshit. All that is bullshit,
hmm
because there is emotion within everything
hmm
that you actually do.
hmm
Yeah, I agree, and it's reductive. To
hmm
me, and like one of my guy friends actually said, like calling a man corny is like the end all be all. But to me, it's corny. Once I hear a man say emotional, like I put you in the corny category. You have nothing else to say. I feel
hmm
like you're not smart, and that may be me being
hmm
judgmental. Hashtag it is,
hmm
but that's how I
Right.
feel about
Hashtag
it.
it is. well,
Hashtag it
well,
is.
I tell you what. Again, or what I was gonna say with Dan, like but that again, it goes both ways. If you're going to use the term, if you're going to label someone emotional, then you better explain it. If you can't explain it, if you can't detail why, then you're just as bad as an individual who brings pure emotions to a conversation
Um,
without no
I
details.
I agree with you, but because I'm an anomaly and I'm very assertive,
Mm.
it's very rare for I've never seen women outside of my circle of friends that will call. I don't believe in calling people out. I like calling them in. So I'm not going to call you out and say, "Why the fuck did you just say that?" I'm going to ask you to explain yourself, and then
Hmm.
I'm going to allow you to discover that you sound like an idiot.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, see.
Um,
Hmm.
but again, that's a learned skill, and that's a part of self-care, because if you end up calling everybody out, you're going to be tired while they're at home watching Netflix with their feet kicked up. I'm not doing that.
Got you. Well, folks, y'all feel warmed up yet?
Yeah.
Y'all feel warmed up?
That's what I needed. That's exactly what I needed.
All right.
Y'all are sick.
What are you talking about?